Hey everybody, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I appreciate having all of you here. This is the WalkAway Thought Revolution College campus tour. We did the WalkAway Thought Revolution College tour in 2019 is when we first started traveling around the country. At the time it was just me, then COVID happened, schools started shutting down, a number of other things happened in 2021 and 2022 that slowed us down a little bit. But we're back. And so the purpose of this tour and the structure in which we do it is that we have 5 people on the panel who all have something in common, besides the fact that our lives are all worse today than they were 4 years ago.
I feel you, bro.
Yeah.
In addition to that fact, we all walked away from the Democratic Party. We all formerly were on the political left. You can clap for that if you want to. You can clap for anything you want to. You can also disagree with anything that we say, and we encourage you to do so, as a matter of fact. So please, when the time comes, feel free to stand up, argue, debate, let us know your thoughts or feelings about anything that we said that you liked or didn't like. We want to hear it all. But tonight we're here to share our stories of why we walked away from the Democratic Party and why we're a part of a movement encouraging other people to do the same thing. I was talking about this recently. Any one of us could have just left the left and changed our voter registration and been quiet about it and gone on with our lives, but everybody on the stage, I actually didn't know anyone on the stage until they made a WalkAway video. And when I saw their videos, I was so impressed with everybody that I ended up contacting them and asking them to be a part on a bigger scale of what we're doing. And all of their videos are extremely viral. And of course, Gothix is also a full-time content creator. She'll share her story in just a moment. But all of us could have made the decision to just change our voter registrations and go on with our lives and be quiet about it. But I think we all agree that there's something kind of a bigger purpose here and something much greater at stake than simply a division in politics or a disagreement about social issues. I think our freedoms, our liberty, and our country and the America that we once knew is in grave peril. And in my opinion, it's in grave peril because of the policies of the Democrat Party and because of what the ideology of liberalism has become and leftism. And so I'm going to kind of do a quick recap of my own walkaway story, and then we'll go down the line one by one and share our stories. But for me, largely I walked away from the Democratic Party because of the media. First and foremost, there's many, many reasons, but primarily that was the main reason. I was a lifelong Democrat who, two-time Obama voter, actually voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and had always voted Democrat my entire adult life. I'm a gay man, so I'm a member of an American minority community that is typically receives the messaging that we're supposed to vote Democrat. There is no seat at the table for us anywhere else but on the left. And I bought into all of that messaging hook, line, and sinker. Also, these are the messages that are reverberated time and again from the entertainment industry, the music industry, academia, the news media. These are the messages that we receive time and time again. And so it never really dawned on me to be anything but a liberal or a Democrat until the election of 2016. When Donald Trump announced that he was running for president, like many people, I thought it was a joke. And I didn't take it very seriously until his momentum continued to grow and grow, and this thing called the MAGA movement started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the media that I trusted, CNN, the New York Times, MSNBC, et cetera, really wasted no time at all trying to take him down. At first they sort of laughed it off, thought it was a joke, but as MAGA started to grow, I believe that what the left-wing media did was put their heads together and ask themselves, okay, what triggers our base more than anything? Social injustice. We have to make this guy the most racist, the most bigoted, the most homophobic, the most xenophobic, transphobic person who's ever run for elected office. And I bought into all of it. So they started churning out the stories one after another. Donald Trump calls all Mexicans rapists. Donald Trump advocates for the sexual assault of women. Donald Trump mocked a disabled reporter. That was a big one for me. So if we flash forward to the election day, the same media that was telling us all of these lies and all of these stories also were saying that Donald Trump had about a 3% chance of winning and that Hillary Clinton was going to win in a landslide. And so imagine my shock and upset and outrage and confusion and anger and fear when the election turned out the way that it did. Suddenly I woke up the next day after the 2016 election, and I was really I was kind of tormented actually by the entire thing, because again, I kept believing that civil rights were going to be rolled back for minority people, and that black people were in danger and gay people were in danger, all of these different things. And so I started kind of lashing out on social media toward people who I knew had voted for Trump. I grew up in a really small town in rural Nebraska. I knew everyone I grew up with had voted for Trump. I knew my parents had voted for Trump. And there was even kind of a period of time where I was like, I'm never going to go home again. I'm never going back to Nebraska. I'm never going to speak to my parents again. Everyone's dead to me. And so, but the pivotal moment for me was in January of 2017. I went on Facebook and I posted that I would never be able to understand how anyone could vote for a man who was capable of mocking a reporter's disability. And that's when somebody, a staunch Christian conservative woman, she was actually my babysitter when I was a kid, reached out to me privately, and she just said, look, I'm not trying to start a big fight with you. I'm just asking, have you seen this? And she sent me a link entitled Debunking that Trump Mocked the Disabled Reporter. It was a video. And I watched the video very skeptically, and what the video was a compilation of footage showing Donald Trump numerous times throughout the years. And a lot of you are probably too young, so I should probably explain this. When he was running for office in 2015 and 16, when he was running the first time for president, there was a moment at one of his rallies where he was imitating a reporter and this reporter was backtracking something he had previously said. It had to do with 9/11, but that's neither here nor there. But when he was imitating this reporter who was now basically lying about something he had previously said, Donald Trump at his rally said, oh, you got to see this guy now. He's going, oh, I don't remember what I said, kind of like that. Well, this reporter happened to be disabled. And part of his disability included having an arm that's kind of short, and his arm kind of looks like this. And so what the media did was, while Donald Trump was flailing, they freeze framed it and stuck that picture up everywhere and said, right beside a picture of the reporter with his arm, and said, Donald Trump mocked reporter's disability. And so this video that I was sent was a compilation of footage that showed Donald Trump doing that same voice and that same gesture numerous times throughout the years when he was imitating anybody who was flailing because they were caught in a lie. And what it showed really clearly and really compellingly was that Donald Trump was not mocking that reporter's disability. He was making fun of the fact that that reporter, who happened to be disabled, was flailing because he was caught in a lie. And it really kind of turned me upside down, because it did not dawn on me that the media could lie, that they were capable of doing that. I mean, I really thought if you heard it on the news, that meant it was true. And so I started asking myself, okay, well, how often is this happening, and why? Why are they doing this? And it sent me down a long journey of research for months, down many rabbit holes, reading, researching, watching videos, and kind of going back to all those key pivotal moments in Donald Trump's campaign. Did he call Mexicans rapists? Did he advocate for a Muslim ban? Things like that. And what I started to find time and again was that in almost every incident, the media had completely misrepresented what Donald Trump had actually said, or in some cases, completely presented the opposite of what he actually said. And so by the time I'd gotten through this kind of months-long fall down a rabbit hole, what I came to the conclusion of was that Donald Trump was not my enemy, but the media that I'd been trusting my entire life was my enemy. And so in 2017, I ended up, and then one thing is, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I started to realize it wasn't just the media. The media perpetuates the lie, but either the lie is created by Democrat politicians or it's picked up by Democrat politicians, really doesn't matter which one, because they know it's a lie too. And then it becomes this circle of misinformation that's constantly being perpetuated by the political left. And what made me so angry about it was the way in which minority communities are targeted. That if you are black or brown or LGBT or a woman or what have you, they're really giving us every piece of news or information through this filter of misinformation, intentionally designed to divide us, pit us against each other, make us mistrustful of the other person on the other side. And in most cases, that is white people in the Republican Party. Straight white people who are conservative are portrayed as the enemy through the media. And it made me very, very angry when I discovered that. And so that is the reason why I chose not only to walk away, but to be outspoken about it. and to try to reach as many people as possible. Because the whole point for me is not to make everybody into a Republican. I really don't care what party you affiliate with, and I really don't care if you like Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump. It doesn't matter to me whatsoever. What does matter to me is if you're being controlled by fear, if you're being misled, if you're allowing the mainstream media to, I always say, control the way that you think so they can control the way that you feel, so ultimately they can control the way that you vote. If you want to be a Democrat, but just please be a fully informed Democrat who actually knows the difference between fact and fiction, reality and a lie. And if that's the choice you make, I don't get it, but I guess that's the choice that you make. But at least be armed with the truth and information, because the truth matters, and that's why I do what I do. So that's why I walked away and why I created WalkAway. And why don't we go one by one and share our stories?
Sure. Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm so glad you're all here. I come from Los Angeles. I've been in Southern California my whole life, and like a lot of people on the stage, I just sort of was reflexively a Democrat, but also didn't know anything about politics. In Southern California, especially, it's very encouraged. I was an actress for a long time, so that's obviously a very left-leaning profession. And I'm a millennial too, and I think in a lot of ways our generation is more left-leaning than is typical for far longer. And I was not at all really politically involved or informed, but every 4 years I would go vote for the Democratic candidate, which was Obama first, and then Hillary Clinton. I drove 100 miles round trip to vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And that was because I was registered in an old county and hadn't bothered to re-register in my new county, because again, I didn't really care about politics. I took it as gospel truth that if you're a compassionate person who cares about minorities or women, as I do, as everyone on the stage does, that you vote Democrat. And the only people I knew who were Republicans were my parents. And when Donald Trump won in 2016, I was very upset. I was in Hollywood that night that he won, and I was working on a production in the heart of Hollywood, and we were all crying. And
So was I.
Not happy tears. Yeah, not happy tears. But two things happened during Trump's presidency, and I very much hated Donald Trump. I am a supporter now, but that's sort of neither here nor there with the WalkAway story, and it's not necessary. But I would have never thought that I would be a supporter. But two things happened during his presidency. The first was that my father was a Trump supporter. And I'm not necessarily particularly close to my father, but I love him very dearly, and he's not a racist. He's not a bad man. And so I had this very visceral awareness that the things that the media was saying were not true, at least not about every Trump supporter, because it wasn't true about my dad. And so that sort of kept me grounded in reality, even as I was very upset and still very liberal. And the second thing that happened during Donald Trump's presidency was that around 2017, 2018, it was the first time that I heard the phrase white privilege, which immediately sat wrong with me, even as I was still very much a Democrat, still very liberal. It does not match my experience. I am very blessed in many ways. I think everyone in this room is, purely to be an American. I'm blessed because I have my health and people who love me, but that has absolutely nothing to do with the color of my skin. And I have watched my parents struggle in very real ways. I watched their parents struggle, and this idea that I have been given something special because of the color of my skin, I can't relate to that at all. And clearly I was being told that I was wrong if I couldn't relate to that. And so I didn't speak up because I was still a Democrat, I was still an actress. And I saw in Hollywood, especially in theater, which I did a lot of, that there was this push for racial diversity, which I have no problem with, but I have a problem when it is your highest value, your first priority. And it was less about telling stories and telling different stories, and it was about how many colors. And I saw that firsthand in Hollywood, and then of course it started spreading out. So those were two things that in retrospect I can see kind of planted the seeds. They weren't enough for me to walk away at the time, but they were two things that sort of were like a red flag for me. And then summer 2020 changed my whole life. Maybe 2020 changed everyone's lives in here. I lost both of my jobs overnight in March 2020. And I never saw those jobs again, which of course I didn't know at the time. And 2019, the year previous, had been a really hard year for my family financially. I had to step up financially for my parents in a really significant way, which is fine. You know, that's my job as a daughter. But it had been a really challenging year. So it was hard to lose my jobs, but I was scared like everybody else, and I wanted to follow all the rules. I didn't know what was going on. And I did. I followed all the rules. I stayed home. I had a weird roommate living situation, but I still stayed home. I only went out to the grocery store. When I went to the grocery store, I wore a mask. I did it all. The only thing I didn't do was not wear a mask outside, because I would take these long walks in LA. And it never made sense to me to wear a mask outside. I'm sorry. I would step away from people when I encountered them. I would give them the right of way, the sidewalk. But it didn't make sense to wear a mask. But even as I did that, they would all stop and yell at me. They would tell me what a terrible person I was. And I was still a Democrat at this time, and I was still following all the rules. And that would really bother me, because sometimes that would be my only face-to-face interaction for the day, because I was following all the rules. And then summer 2020, it became abundantly clear to me, to all of us, implicitly and explicitly, that we could go out and protest or riot, because I come from Los Angeles, loot on behalf of BLM, but I couldn't go to work. And BLM would have been an organization, it's certainly a sentiment that I support, but it would have been an organization that I would have supported. I was a Democrat. I was totally like-minded with these people, but the idea that I could go out and do that, but I couldn't go to work. And I support everyone's First Amendment right to protest, but how is it that I can't go to work? And I had certainly Republicans as well, but all the Democrat politicians, the media, even the medical community signing letters saying, don't shut down these protests. And I needed and I wanted to go back to work. And when I mentioned this to all of my liberal friends, which were all of my friends, everyone I knew except for my parents, I was called racist and I was called selfish every single time. People that knew me, loved me, liked me, I had done theater with, etc. And it was this constant refusal to recognize that I might have any honest reason for disagreeing. And that continued. It was not a little blip on the radar. And so I walked away from the Democratic Party, because I had thought that this had been the party, this had been the people that cared about the underdog. In many ways, I feel like that's me. I feel like I'm an average American who works hard, who needed to go to work. And it was clear to me that these people actually hated me. And they proved me right every single day. You know, I can admit that at the beginning, a lot of Republican politicians had it wrong. Maybe they kept it wrong. But in LA, we were in a mask mandate for 2 years straight. That was all Democrat policies. There was a period where I couldn't go into a bar or restaurant and be served because I didn't have the right medical papers. I would have to sit outside or just not be served at all, which is absolutely insane. I certainly couldn't go to events. I lost jobs. I walked away from jobs. I got fired. And so it was like proving me right, like I said, every single day. And I did not immediately become, now I am a conservative Christian and a content creator towards that end. It did not happen immediately. But once the veil had been lifted, once the scales fell from my eyes, I could see, fell from my eyes, that how much I'd been lied to. I'd been lied to about so much. Similar to Brandon, I started looking into Donald Trump because although I think he mishandled many things at the beginning of the pandemic, he, to me, as someone who was totally new to politics, seemed to be the only one talking about opening up the country, and I was so desperate to just go back to work. So I looked into him, and I realized that I'd been lied to about the Charlottesville, very fine people on both sides. I don't know if you've heard that, but I thought for 3 years at that time, 3 years straight, that he had called Nazis very fine people. And then I looked up the full clip, and turns out he didn't. Twice he condemned them in that press conference. And that was news to me. And then that led me down a rabbit hole of compilations of him condemning white supremacy over and over and over again. And I had it on good authority that actually he'd never condemned white supremacy. He refused to. So it sort of became a thing of, not that I necessarily had to support Trump, but if you've lied to me so many times about this man, if he's as bad as you say he is, why do you have to lie, you know? And I realized just how much I had been lied to and how much I had been living my life according to these ideas of feminism and the way that a woman is supposed to behave like a man, and how unhappy that had made me in so many ways. And so it was sort of this rabbit hole of discovering. And it was I walked away immediately in summer 2020 from the Democratic Party, but over the course of about a year and a half, I'm proud to say I became a Christian conservative because in many ways, and this is of course a longer story, I realized that more often than not, the conservative position makes the most sense. And when I was voting Democrat, not only was I uninformed, but I was also just purely very emotional, and I had been manipulated, I'd been lied to by a lot of people, basically all of Hollywood, every single institution, legacy media, all of it. And I felt a very strong sense of betrayal, and that's why I'm up here on this stage, because I would prefer that a lot of people not have to go through what I had to go through and not have to wait so long to really see the truth. So that's my story. Thank you.
My online handle is Gothics. I'm a content creator. I initially started making content, just streaming video games on Twitch. It was not very political at all. And now most of the things that I talk about on YouTube are political in nature, relating to culture and things like that, but it wasn't by choice. I sort of got pushed into that field as a result of me waking up politically. And so basically, I never really was into politics at all, but I had a lot of opinions about politics. To give you some context, I had severe Trump derangement syndrome. I hated Trump. I hated everyone who voted for Trump. I actually cut off one of my best friends. I didn't speak to her for like a year because I could not understand how my white friend would vote for someone who was against my people, being black people, apparently. And so my political awakening pretty much happened over the course of maybe like 2 years. It started during when Disney announced that they were going to be doing a live-action remake of The Little Mermaid. I was wondering, why are they making Ariel black? I was very confused by this. So naturally, I go online, I ask this question, and I started to get a lot of pushback from people who were my fans. A lot of them were black fans, and they were like, they couldn't understand why I had such a problematic anti-black opinion. And that sort of stuck with me right here, because I'm like, my audience just turned on me for a very reasonable question, and I also didn't like how if anyone opposed Ariel being turned black, you were automatically a racist, and that doesn't make any sense to me. So a few months later, COVID starts, and we're told to stay home and flatten the curve. Meanwhile, the BLM protest starts, and now all of a sudden you can go out as long as you are protesting to end racial injustice or something like that. So that hypocrisy didn't make any sense to me. Either COVID is deadly or it's not. Either we stay home or we don't. We don't get to pick and choose. And once again, I brought up the question, what does stealing a 70-inch TV have to do with ending police brutality? And once again, I got hate. And then it dawned on me, hold on, I keep getting pushback from black leftists. There is something going on about this. So then I started going down a rabbit hole and I started literally researching black people who stopped being Democrat. And the amount of stuff that I got, it was crazy. The first thing that I watched was the Uncle Tom documentary. And what I came to realize after watching that is that we have been lied to about history. People love to go on and on about we need to teach the proper history. No, we're being taught selective history. And I don't know if I can speak for all the blacks on this stage, but maybe people can relate to, if you are black, there's something called the black card. And there's sort of like this expectation that you're supposed to behave in a certain way, and that trickles down all the way to who you vote for. And so when you are born black in America, it's sort of insinuated that you will be voting Democrat. Don't ask questions, just vote Democrat, which is exactly what I did when Obama was running. I voted for him because he's black. Knew nothing about his policies, but he's black and I need to help my people or something like that. So yeah, and that process got me to start really considering all the things that I used to believe. One of the things was about Trump, and then I realized that, oh wow, the media is lying about him. They're taking these clips and they're using clickbait and distorting it, taking it totally out of context, and they're emotionally extorting people who wear their identity on their sleeve. If you are black and you see a video of some guy in office talking about anything racist, of course you're going to oppose him, right? And then that makes room for a political savior to come in who makes empty promises about ending white supremacy or something like that. So yeah, I just came to realize that the media is not on our side. They're not there to tell us the news. They're not there to keep us informed. They're there to get us emotionally riled up so then they can use that to get us marching to the ballot box. They don't actually care about us. And that's pretty much my walkaway story.
Yeah.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Zakaiya Cooper. I'm 24 years old and I'm from Chicago, born and raised. And the story of how I left the Democratic plantation was actually pretty traumatic. So in 2021, I moved out of my parents' house into my first apartment, and I decided to pick an apartment where I was to be assigned a bathroom mate. When I first moved in, I didn't have a roommate. So, I was content with my situation. And about a year after I moved in, I started noticing that the toilet seat in my bathroom was being left up as if it was being used by a man. And so, my first thoughts was that I was assigned a roommate because nobody notified me of this. So I thought I was assigned a roommate. Maybe I missed the email or something. And I assumed it was a girl. She maybe had a boyfriend or something who had been occupying the space, and he just was careless about putting the toilet seat down. So I blew it off basically. And I had basically got confirmation that I'd actually been assigned a biologically male roommate. I found this out because I actually encountered the person. We came out of the room at the same time, and I got to see him face to face. It was a man who was he was going through the transition of male to female, transgender, and so given this circumstance, I was obviously taken aback. But having been a Democrat my entire life, born and raised, basically, I kind of was trying to be polite about it, trying to be PC, trying to figure out the best course of action that wouldn't offend anybody. So I reached out to my housing manager to see maybe if there was a mix-up or something, and she had basically told me that, yeah, we had to assign him as a roommate. He identifies as a girl, so yeah, we weren't allowed to discriminate against him. And that was insane to me. I just couldn't believe it. So that basically kind of forced me down the conservative rabbit hole. Like, I had to figure out what I had been supporting, because like I said, I was a strong Democrat. Like I was attending Black Lives Matter rallies and everything in 2020. So when I had this realization that I had basically been eclipsing myself as a woman by supporting these policies, that's when I had to wake up, and I realized, wow, I call myself a Christian, but I'm supporting demonic policies, and that's very hypocritical of me. So basically, similar to Gothics, when I revealed myself publicly as being conservative, being a Trump supporter, I got so much hate and backlash from both the internet and my family. My mom told me I was brainwashed and still thinks that to this day. It pretty much gave me confirmation that I was on the right side of history, because if you don't know the difference between men and women, you're not operating in reality, and I can't agree with that. I can't, you call yourself an adult, you call yourself reasonable, but you're willing to live a lie. I don't support that. So yeah, that was basically my story. This is my husband. Our stories are very intertwined, because him and I were living in the apartment complex together. So yeah, we both pretty much went down the rabbit hole together. And so now we're pretty much just on an island. Like I said, we're from Chicago. We live on the South Side. There aren't any conservatives around us at all. None. There aren't any. So pretty much everybody thinks we're crazy and we don't know what we're talking about, but we know we're on the right side of history. So.
Nice.
Well, you got that church on the south side with the rooftop pastor. He's conservative.
Is he?
Is he?
Yeah. The guy that was on the rooftop.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Is it New Horizons?
I know what guy you're talking about. I can't remember his name.
New Beginnings.
We're moving to Texas, so we're escaping that. Yeah, we're done.
You gotta save Chicago too.
They
We can save it from the internet.
I mean, all of us are only a few hours from Chicago. We gotta save it because they're gonna.
Well, I'm an online content creator, so I do use my platform to educate the masses, but do that from afar.
Yeah,
And
you and I have conversed a little bit on that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm glad
Awesome.
you're up to 22,000 followers.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna, we're gonna touch on that too as far as Save Chicago. So what's going on, guys? My name is Darrell. As you already heard, this is my wife, and our two stories are very intertwined because I was with her through the whole situation of her panicking because she had a man as her roommate. Like, she was like, what if I leave the door unlocked? Because it was literally just a door separating him from us. So really, the rabbit hole really started. That initiated the rabbit hole, but I was always kind of skeptical because as a black person, you know, you kind of got to think a certain way, got to act a certain way. You definitely got to vote a certain way. When I started voting, I asked my mom who to vote for. She said, vote for Democrat. I said, what's the difference between Democrat and Republican? She said, Democrats are for the people, Republicans mess up the office whenever they get in the office, whatever that meant. So during COVID, I remember the beginning of the pandemic, and it started in Florida, like during spring break, because I was in college at the time. And I remember getting back from Florida and seeing on the news that there's a pandemic in Florida that I had just left of COVID. And I thought that was really weird because I was like, I was just there and it wasn't none of that actually happening. So at that point, they just locked the country down. They was like, you can't go to the gym, you can't go to work. All the classes are online, but you can go out and protest. You can go to a BLM protest, but we can't play basketball. You know, it just didn't, nothing really made any sense. So when we got to this point of the roommate situation, by this time I had met her and we were dating, we went down the conservative rabbit hole. We came in contact with like Matt Walsh, because no single Democrat was talking about this like as if it was a problem. When we would watch the news, they were all like, yeah, gay rights, yeah, this right, this, that, and the third. We're like, why are they talking about this like it's a good thing? And this guy over here, who they call a racist, is actually making sense. So we was listening to Matt Walsh and we started watching What is a Woman? And that's when we just went all the way down the rabbit hole. And we're just like, oh my goodness. And at the same time, you know, I was also raised non-denomination Christian. So at that point I was also on like my own personal spiritual journey. She was as well. So we started to reevaluate our values. Like, what do we actually believe in? And why do we disagree with this stuff? Once we realized we was Christians, we're like, okay, we need to be getting married. But the rabbit hole literally didn't stop at just conservatism or just like the LGBTQ stuff. It got even deeper when we came across Jesse Lee Peterson, who pretty much Christ pilled us, like to the point where we realized that our skin color had become an idol, to where being black was more important than anything else. It didn't matter that this was black, this had to be black. So just realizing that, being able to separate myself from my color and being able to see our history objectively, you get to see that the black community has been a Trojan horse for communism since the civil rights movement. So that alone, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So that alone was a really big wake up call. And like Gotha said, you learn stuff like that from Uncle Tom and other conservative Christians. And yeah, now I'm here.
So we definitely want to encourage any of you who have any questions or any thoughts or any feedback or anything to speak up.
I was a Democrat, and I switched to a Republican. Actually, it happened when I ran for office. I ran for mayor last year, and I was still a Democrat, and I got into politics. I go to school here. I'm a political science major, and they thought it was funny. Thought it was cute and all like that. And then my buddies kept telling me about the Republicans, and I was brainwashed like, well, no, man, they all like this, man. I'm from the South Side of Chicago too, Robert Taylor Projects, you know.
Right on.
So I was like, no, man, they hate me. I said, no, man. So I'm the type of person to do my research. So the more I started researching about Republicans, the more I started realizing that I was being brainwashed by the Democrats. So then when I ran for political office, I ran as a Republican. I'm running again this year for state assembly and stuff when I get done with school. And the other thing is, another big reason, because I ain't with all that crazy shit, man. I ain't with all that. And the Democrats like that, man, and it pissed me off. They pissed me off so much, that's another reason why I'm out.
Yeah.
You know, don't mess with me, man. You know, I don't want the thug to come out, and so they pissed me off. You know, I'm from the South Side, so, and that pissed me off, playing games, and you can do this, and be all like that, and it's like that. Another thing is, I am a Christian, so I used to be a preacher and stuff, and that was a big part of my faith. And even being a political science major, I graduate as a non-traditional student from UW this spring semester, and even in my political science studies, majority is 65% of Republicans are Christian, only 40% of Christians are Democrat. So we mainly like that, and so that also tells me a lot too. So just And like that, as soon as I became a Republican, you know, of course, my black folks, they, man, you tripping, what's going on? My mom said, son, you know, you still my baby, but we got to talk, you know. And but they respect me now, you know. I don't push it on them, you know. And I'm running for office, and I want to make it to the White House. And I'm all about the people. I still got the Democrats' thoughts of helping people, but I'm a straight up Republican all the way. That ain't gonna change. But it's not about the person, it's not about Donald Trump, it's about what needs to be done. That's my own focus. And what needs to be done, I can do it as a Republican better than I can do Democrat. I ain't with all that bullshit. So it's more about the policies and doing. So I switched over, and you know, they can get mad all they want. I'm a big dude, so ain't nobody can push up on me.
Hi, I'm Mark. I am studying journalism and sports communication here at UW-Madison. So like my story, very similar to you guys, being a Democrat. I remember I was a big, extreme Democrat in high school. I remember my friends in high school, they ran this SAFE club, which essentially is a club for equality and diversity and all of that. And those were the only things that I was taught. Our family would only watch one news source. You can probably guess what that is.
CNN.
Exactly. Exactly. And I never thought for myself. I was like, okay, I have to believe what my friends believe. I have to believe what my family believes, or I could get canceled, right? But then once I got to college, I transferred from Butler, actually in Indianapolis. That's my first college I was at. So when I was at Butler in 2021, my freshman year, that's kind of like when I was more separated from my high school friends that I graduated with. That's really when I started to really think for myself, and I did a lot more research on Donald Trump and a lot of these different movements. And then when I really began to realize, when I actually started to really look through them again, I started to realize just how uninformed I was. And I remember you brought up this story about how they can do these really bad and grotesque protests, yet we have to stay home. And then when I kind of heard about when someone said that, I forgot where and who said that, but when they said that, I was just like very shocked, like, so this is how we've been lied to this entire time. And then I really started to think for myself a lot more and like what I really stand for. And that's when I really stood for being a conservative. I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter what your friends think. It doesn't matter if they unfriend you or not. Maybe they're just not meant to be, right? And what matters is what you think, and you shouldn't worry about what others think. So that's kind of like my advice I would give to anyone in politics is don't believe something because your friend or your best friends believe it. Believe it for yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, and if I could kind of add to what you just said too, I think that first of all, I want to applaud you for making that decision. I want to applaud you as well, and anyone else who makes that decision. But I think there are a lot of people who I think don't have that strength of character to make the decision to change their lives, because it is a tough decision to make. I mean, I think everyone on this panel probably has lost friends and family and job opportunities, and it's extremely disrupting to your life. And there are definitely a lot of people who feel the way that you do, and this guy does, and all of us here do, but aren't willing to make that sacrifice. So they put their head down, they keep going, and they just kind of laugh at all the anti-Trump jokes and laugh at all the anti-Republican jokes and go along with all of the pronouns and all the whatever is going on, and then probably secretly go in the voting booth and vote for Trump or whatever. But I think it takes a certain strength of character to say, I don't want to live my life this way. Like it's another version of living in the closet, quite frankly. And I think for people who want to live an authentic life and live in a life of truth and reality, we can't make that. None of us on this stage could make that decision, and obviously you couldn't either. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Billy. We met at CPAC at the College Republicans event.
How's it going?
I'm the chairman of the club here too. I'm doing well. So I was at.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming. So I was at the Brown County Lincoln Day dinner where you spoke on Saturday. Yeah. And I was just wondering. I don't know how many people here are familiar with like your story involving January 6th, but I think it's a super impactful thing to hear, considering that's like the main mode of attack the left is using against conservatives is this lawfare against us. Do you think you could just kind of share maybe just the Spark Notes version about that with everyone?
Of course I can. Yeah, and honestly, the only reason I haven't really been doing it when we've been going to colleges is because January 6th was 3.5 years ago, and probably a lot of people were like 15 when that happened and don't even fully get it. But yeah, the Cliff's Notes version is that I went to Washington D.C. on January 6th. I was actually a scheduled speaker. There was supposed to be a second event on Capitol grounds, a permitted event with a stage. And so the plan for the day was for President Trump to speak and then for the crowd to march to the Capitol. And then there was a second event that was supposed to take place at the Capitol. And I was one of dozens of scheduled speakers. And when I got there, I started getting text messages saying that people were going inside the building. I didn't know exactly what that meant. So I started shooting a video and walking up to the Capitol. Now, I was on the east side of the building. And then there's this guy on Twitter. This guy on Twitter who says, every day I'm going to post this video until the election. And so he posts this compilation footage of like the most violent images of January 6th. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I think that for a lot of people, that is their perception of what January 6th is. It's almost like if you were there, then surely you must have seen police officers being pushed around or windows being broken or some sort of chaos in the crowd. I witnessed none of that. None of that. Nothing like that was going on the east side of the building where I was. The crowd was very, very calm. No one was trying to storm the building. No one was breaking anything. So I'm shooting this video thinking like, okay, once again, fake news, like nothing's going on whatsoever. And I walk up to the Capitol where there's thousands of people standing outside of the building just holding signs, doing nothing. And there's a man at the top of the steps. You see him in my video, and he starts shouting, "They opened the doors. They're letting us in. We're going inside. We're going inside." So I walked up to the top of the stairs. When I got there, sure enough, both doors of the Capitol were wide open. There was a crowd of people, several hundred people at the top of the stairs. Some of them were trying to push their way in. The majority were just shooting a video like I was. And so I stood outside the building for 8 minutes shooting a video. A man came out of the building after 8 minutes, got on a bullhorn and said, "They've cleared Congress, everyone left the building, move out, go this way, go this way." And so I immediately turned around, walked down the stairs. I stayed on the outer grounds for about 30 minutes, shooting 13 more videos, doing street interviews. And then I left and I uploaded my original video to Twitter. So to be clear, I never entered the Capitol on January 6th. I didn't engage in any violence, vandalism, theft, or destruction, nor did I witness any. But I did stand outside of the building on the steps for 8 minutes shooting that video, and I uploaded it to Twitter. And 2.5 weeks later, the FBI raided my house at dawn, got me out of bed, put me in handcuffs, took me to jail, and a team of FBI agents came into my apartment, started stripping my apartment of my computers, my phones, my iPads, my hard drives, my thumb drives, my phone, my camera equipment. Maybe I should be telling this at college. All the young people are like, yeah.
That's crazy.
And I spent 2.5 days in jail. And when I got out of jail, I learned that I was facing 2 felony charges and a misdemeanor, and that the government was threatening to add a 3rd felony charge of obstruction of an official proceeding. So I was literally facing potentially up to 30 years in prison for the 8 minutes that I stood nonviolently outside of the Capitol on January 6th. So the government came at me with that, or they said, we'll drop all these felony charges if you'll plead guilty to a misdemeanor. I didn't even want to do that, but my attorney very rightfully told me your alternative here is to go before a DC judge and a DC jury. And for those of you who don't know, in Washington, DC, 93% of the citizens of DC voted for Biden, which means they voted against Donald Trump. Nobody voted for Biden. So this is a district that 93% of its constituents hate Donald Trump and hate his supporters. This would be the jury that would be deciding my fate about January 6th. And so I could either go to a DC judge and a DC jury, and my attorney told me it'll cost you at least $250,000 if you go to trial, or you can accept their plea deal. Given the options before me, I took the government's plea deal, which was to plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge, which doesn't seem like a big deal, except for I didn't know at the time that when you plead guilty, you also have to sign the government statement of offense. So the government essentially writes your confession for you, and you sign it. And in this case, my statement of offense said that I went to DC and I went to the Capitol with the intent to disrupt the hearing before Congress and to disrupt the certification of the vote. It went on and on about how I believed that the election was stolen and that this completely uncompromised election. That I went there to overturn this flawless election that took place. And it also said that given I have a very large social media following, and WalkAway, especially at the time, had a very large following. I say at the time because of January 6th, they banned WalkAway on social media platforms. I was banned on social media platforms, a number of other things. But the government argued that because of my following and the success of WalkAway and whatnot, that my mere presence at the Capitol was basically an encouragement for people to storm the building. So they actually blamed me for being a part of causing the insurrection. And another peculiar thing, and then I'll stop, is in my statement of offense, it also says, now mind you, I can't contradict this, okay? I signed it, it's true. All I would say is, please watch my video. It's one of the rare times where you'll hear a criminal screaming, please look at the evidence. So I encourage all of you to please watch my video. The government said that when I got to the Capitol, I witnessed police officers doing their best to restrain the crowd from going in the building. Please watch my video, and if you can show me where that's happening, I'd love to see that. But anyway, so that's in a nutshell what happened with January 6th. And then I pled guilty to a misdemeanor. And in addition to, my attorney told me, nobody goes to jail on a first offense misdemeanor. You don't have a prior criminal record. You already spent 2.5 days in jail. Just plead guilty. The judge will give you time served, and you can move on with your life. We didn't realize at that time how corrupt the DC courts are. So we were very surprised. And my poor attorney, who has 4 decades of federal trial experience, none of these attorneys are prepared for what's happening with these January 6th cases. We got to my sentencing, my judge shredded me for an hour, and I knew I was in trouble very quickly. I was like, oh, this is not gonna go at all how we thought it was gonna go. And she made it quite clear that if she could have given me a much, much worse sentence, she would have, but she was bound to, the constraints of what she could do with a misdemeanor charge. And so she gave me 3 months of house arrest. So the government put an ankle tracking monitor on me, and I wasn't allowed to leave my home for 3 months. I'm still serving 3 years of federal probation. That will end 10 more months of that. 60 hours of community service, the maximum fine of $5,000. I had to pay a $500 restitution payment to the Capitol, although it was acknowledged that I didn't do any destruction to the Capitol. And to add insult to injury, court-ordered mental health services. Because obviously I voted for Donald Trump, so I'm insane. So for the 3 months that I was on house arrest, I had to go to a government-issued therapist. And all of that for a first offense misdemeanor charge. And for one of you had brought up BLM, and I just thought it was funny because the violence and destruction and damage that was done by BLM, including dozens of lives lost and thousands of police officers beaten. More than 90% of the January 6th rioters, or excuse me, 90% of the Black Lives Matter rioters have had all of their charges dropped. Not a single January 6th defendant has had their cases dropped. So I think that's interesting.
I really enjoyed hearing your story about your experience with the FBI and the inherently broken justice system. It's really important and impactful to me because I'm a communist. I'm a member of the Revolutionary Communists of the USA. So we are genuinely trying to overthrow the government and create socialism in the United States to create communism. So I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are on communism. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate that. I'm pleased to hear that you're not against me for January 6th because, are you? Let's start there. Okay, can you? What do you think about January 6th? Let's start there.
I'm not totally sure. I think that if I were in charge of a socialist government, I probably wouldn't tolerate an insurrection to a socialist government because it serves the working class of the United States as a whole, as a majority. So in that sense, against the bourgeoisie, against a class structure in the United States where some people have property and some are oppressed and forced to work for a wage for the service of capital. But in this situation, I'm not entirely sure.
Oh, well, I only asked the question because it's interesting that you are actually saying that you are trying to overthrow the government. I mean, you actually want to engage in an insurrection against the United States, but the government doesn't seem interested in talking to you. They're more interested in talking to elderly people who walked inside the Capitol and took pictures. To answer your second question, I'm sure it won't shock you to hear that I'm not for communism. I'm anti-communism. I'm pro-capitalism. I suppose in my more Democrat days, I probably was more tolerant of socialism, or I could probably see a greater good perhaps in socialism. I no longer feel that way. I find it to be a very dangerous ideology. I find communism to be a very dangerous ideology, but I don't think we have to speculate or take my word for it. I mean, I think we can just look historically at how this has gone in other nations that have led to hundreds of millions of people being killed, and the enslaving of people and the complete destruction and decimation of once thriving nations. So, no, I would do everything I possibly could to fight a communist takeover of this country. In fact, that's what we're doing right now.
Amen.
Can I
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So why did you want to become a communist?
I became a communist because I got tired of seeing the oppression that was being instituted by imperialism all around the world, right? Like we see the situation in Palestine today, where the US is bankrolling the Israeli oppression of the Palestinian people. They're enforcing the siege on Gaza, where all the Palestinians in Gaza are suffering a severe lack of food, of water, of medical services because of the Israeli bombardment of civilians and the more than 30,000 civilian casualties. So in order to change the system where imperialism is inherently embedded in capitalism, I became a communist so that we could get past the Democratic and the Republican parties, which are both in the service of capitalism and will do nothing to change imperialism.
Okay. So I agree that they are funding basically a genocide with Israel and Palestine. But is there a country that got it right, or is there like an ideal communist country that we can model after if we were to effectively switch to a communist state?
You can just keep the mic.
Yeah, we might as well.
Yeah. I would encourage anybody who's interested in learning about communism to look at the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the history leading up to it, primarily the Bolshevik Party under Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, which lasted until Lenin's, death. Under Lenin, there was a workers' democracy in Russia, and I don't think many people know what a workers' democracy is, but essentially the Soviets in Russia were generating regional workers' councils where they had the workplaces of the working class in Russia, the emerging proletariat, as like regional centers of democracy. So it's the most democratic system that the world's ever seen, and it's far more democratic than the system we have in the US today. Because these regional Soviets were in charge of controlling production, so they could organize and administrate production for social need instead of production for capitalism or private gain, which we see today in the US where there are so many billionaires. And it's not produced for social need, it's produced for the interests of capital. So I would encourage people to look at the workers' democracy in Russia leading up to 1917.
I had a follow-up to that. That's your microphone now. You can take it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, are there any areas that practice communism right now that exist today, or is the framework that you're looking for something that existed in the past? Like, is there something we can reference? Can I hop on a plane and go somewhere that matches your ideal framework of what a communist society would look like?
There is not. Our ideal communism is something that we're going to create for the first time since Russia created it in 1917. In the near future, in the United States and all the countries around the world, for socialism is international or it is nothing.
So I guess my question is if you're referencing something, you mentioned, like, I forget exactly what date you're talking about here. If you're mentioning something that happened and it's no longer existing, why is it that you think that you and like your communist group will be able to achieve that? Like, how are you guys getting it right as opposed to all of the other instances throughout history where they've tried to do essentially the same thing? Or how come that framework that you're talking about doesn't exist anymore?
Right? Thank you for the question. I think what we're doing differently than other tendencies today is that our approach to creating this change is happening in the US versus in Russia. One of the problems with the 1917 revolution in Russia was that Russia was a country which was basically one of the poorest countries in the entirety of the world. It was extremely poor. It lived off of potatoes, and there was a dramatic food shortage following World War I when the revolution in Russia was happening because of what Russia had done during the war. So as a result, it's been very difficult for the revolution in Russia to actually create the conditions for socialism. Because for socialism, the idea is to produce for everyone's need. It's to create a material abundance in society by developing the productive forces so that everybody can have their needs met within society. And this was impossible in Russia at the time, despite what the Bolsheviks did to improve the productive forces by the planned economy, which is one of the important parts of socialism.
How can we achieve a society where everyone's needs are met when everyone has different needs?
The primary focus of socialism would be for the basic needs of humanity, guaranteeing the right to food, to housing, things that officially the United States does not guarantee, right? In a situation where we have more houses than we need, we have the greatest production of food that the world has ever seen, more than enough to feed all of the hungry, but we have a distribution problem. We can't get these food in these homes where people need them, and there are tremendous social crises affecting the entire world that have created famines, created situations like the siege on Gaza, where hundreds of thousands of people die because their needs are not met. So this would be one of the first focuses of socialism, is providing disaster relief to Palestine and countries like Palestine that are suffering from grave crises.
I have another question really quick. Because you mentioned, so some of the needs are food and housing. And then you also mentioned earlier that you were sick of oppression, and this is why you want socialism. You want to lift people out of this oppressive state, right? So how do you achieve a society where people are guaranteed food and housing without considering, who is going to supply that? You would have to be willing to provide that, would you not? How are you going to make it so everyone gets all of these things? Someone has to supply that, no? So do you think that in a socialist society there's going to be no oppression? I don't understand how that would work.
Of course. Again, I'm going to go back to Russia in 1917. The idea is that organizing a democracy of the working class is the key to organizing production. And when you organize production, when you've organized your economy in a planned manner, so instead of the chaos of the anarchy of production under capitalism, we've created a system where production for need is possible. People can reduce their working hours and produce what is actually needed in society in a decisive way, decided by councils and elected bodies of membership that can actually produce what is needed in society.
That sounds horrible.
So one thing so you keep referencing, right? So let's just say, for the sake of an argument, let's imagine in this scenario that you are proposing this idea of having this production stuff, and let's say I just don't want to help. I just don't care about the fact that people are going hungry for this scenario, right? But let's say that I have a farm, I have the ability to produce crops, but I don't actually want to give people free stuff just because they want it. So what do you do in that situation where, because you're operating under the assumption that people want to help, so how are you going to get this society that you want if people just genuinely don't want to work for free?
Of course. You'd find yourself in a position very similar to the peasants in Russia in 1917. These are the Russian peasants who, in a situation where there was a grave crisis of hunger in the country,
what would you do, though?
peasants started hoarding grain in order to prevent the Russian, or rather the Soviet Union state, from distributing food to the population who was starving. In my position, I would be focused mostly on the fact that the United States has a complete abundance of production. It is more monopolized today than it's ever been, and socialized. So our production structures for agriculture are in the hands of big companies who generally create the entirety of the production. We don't have a peasant class in the United States today. So I would say it's not an entirely relevant question, considering that most of the agricultural surplus is generated by these large companies, which could be administered through the hands of the workers, and that this production, raising the level of production to socialize it into these very efficient manners of producing, which produce at a lower cost and a faster time than any that the world has ever seen, would be the focus.
So really quick, I want to say this and then I'll give it back to someone else because I know I've been taking up this. I'm very passionate about this topic. Obviously, I'm wearing a Karl Marx shirt. I think he's a worthless idol. I don't think we should be worshiping dead people who were deadbeats when they were alive, and that's who Karl Marx is. But neither here nor there. I've made many friends over the last couple of years who grew up under communism. And one of my good friends, Lily Tang Williams, she actually grew up at the tail end of the Cultural Revolution in China. And so when I ask these questions, she tells me of these horrific stories of the government basically killing landlords, killing farmers. So when we talk about this idea that we should be supplying these needs for citizens, my question of how are we going to achieve that when people don't want to help? So in this scenario, the government comes in and kills all these people, and so, and even in terms of like food, my friend, she had to, and this is really grotesque, but her neighbors, they had to swap the dead children of each other's families in order to eat. That's how poor they were. They had to eat rats. And, so this is something that I hope you consider. It's like when I ask you, like, how are we going to achieve this utopian vision of everyone having their needs met? I don't find it helpful to go back into history and cite a framework that doesn't even exist. I think there's a reason why it doesn't exist. I think if we look at all of, throughout history, there's a reason why America has lasted as long as it has, and it's not because of communism. So that's what I would recommend, just considering that.
I had a question. So I noticed you hadn't really answered the question of how you were going to get the goods from the farmers. But essentially, you would have to oppress the farmers or, kill them and take their stuff. So once you take their stuff and give it to the people, who's going to then replenish the stuff that you took?
I would say that we're not oppressing the farmers, because I wouldn't call the owner of the largest agricultural companies in America farmers. I would say that the workers they employ at the very bottom of that hierarchy are the farmers.
So you would take from the corporations?
Yes, we would.
People run the corporations.
Yes, we would.
So you would oppress the people in the corporations to take their things, right?
We would take control of the corporations by the people. It would be a bottom-up process of the workers in the corporation becoming the runners of the industry. And in that sense, the workers would be the ones who are running this large industry of production in the interest of society.
And I have my own farm, and that I can't do that anymore. Private farmers, private individuals can't do that for the sake of everyone.
Yeah. But one of the fundamental problems, I think, with what you're talking about, too, and we're just using this one example of food distribution and farming, but even in that example, and I think any other example of any other industry in socialism, what you're really doing is de-incentivizing greatness for anybody. Yes. Nobody has any motivation to ever thrive or achieve. So any human being who wants to, who maybe grew up poor and says, I want to be a wealthy person. I want to work really hard. I want to be the best farmer there is. I want to be the best performer there is. I want to be the best business person there is. You have no incentive to ever grow, because there's always going to be a cap that you're never allowed to grow beyond, because the government that controls your life will never allow you to do it. So why would any human being ever have any incentive to grow or thrive?
I would counter that. I would say we don't have a tremendous incentive today, actually, based on the rising depression and suicide rates in America. You know, these have never been higher. It's generally a grave state of decay. And there's a worldwide crisis because of the effect of capitalism in a situation where the rich have never been richer. There's a greater wealth disparity.
I disagree.
So I would say for people interested in looking at the general prospects under socialism, I would say we wouldn't have to deal with oppression under capitalism and imperialism anymore. And for the people in Palestine, that would mean a lot of opportunity.
We can keep the conversation going. There's a couple people here who probably want to get in on it, so let's let them.
Thank you all for coming out. My name is Luca DiMaggio. I'm a political philosophy major here at Madison. Like our friend over there, I'm not a communist. I am a non-Marxian socialist, but I will do some of the work here to help defend existing socialist governments. You said something earlier about how it decreased the standard of living. Actually, that's not correct. If you look at the HDI, which is Human Developmental Index, which measures standard of living, wage, purchasing power parity, level of housing, etc. Actually, the Soviet Union was significantly better than modern Russia, and it was significantly better than imperial Russia. So if we look at just that on the whole, the Soviet Union was actually, it's 0.92 is its grade. Modern America is 0.96, I believe. Modern Western European countries usually around 0.95. So it's comparable at the very least to modern Western European countries. For reference, modern Russia is 0.82, right? So just to give a comparison, right? So if we look at, this is also generally the case across most Eastern Bloc countries, though not always, right? But in most cases, the HDI and the Gini index, which measures inequality, wealth inequality, was significantly better under the Eastern Bloc countries. So then we must ask the question, well, why didn't they work, right? That's a great question. I think that's the question of the hour. Right. So a big reason why the Soviet Union fell apart is because they had such a massive issue with the succession problem. Right. So you will see I don't think there's any Soviet leader that comes to mind that didn't either die in office or didn't get couped. Right. So I'd say the biggest problem with the Soviet Union was they had the succession issue. I wouldn't say that their issue was necessarily economics, because if we look at the economic growth rate under the Soviet Union, especially from 1928 to 1938, it's actually one of the fastest growing economies in human history. They did a really tremendous import substitution policy, which allowed them to industrialize the country from being one of the least industrialized countries per capita in Europe to, I believe it was the second or third most. Don't quote me on that, though. I think it was second or third most industrialized country, and actually it's the reason they won the war against the Germans. Not to mention, in the 1950s, it allowed them to lift a bunch of people out of poverty. So I'd actually say it was relatively successful in terms of its application. But the problem with socialism historically is where it came up was primarily in the third world, which is actually, if you read Karl Marx, not where it's supposed to come up. If you read Marx, he thinks the revolution is going to happen in England or Germany or industrialized countries, right? He got that wrong. It came in the third world. And this lends itself to a massive problem, because when you're third world developing countries with a very antagonistic ideology, we should say, against a lot of the first world developed countries, you're not going to have a very fun time when compared to the U.S. And I guess I'll leave it on this for this. I'm sure you're going to have some rebuttals or some responses. But I would say that comparing the U.S. to the Soviet Union is a bit of an unfair comparison, because where the U.S. was in 1917 is a lot different than where Imperial Russia was in 1917. And I'd say we should look at the progress in terms of, again, the metrics I brought up that were made under the Soviet Union, and not so much this comparison that is often made, because I don't think it's very nuanced. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys love 1917. I mean, look, I have a couple questions for you. And I don't know, if anybody wants to jump in.
Questions.
I'm in class again.
So, no, I mean, actually, that was a lot of information.
Yeah, I'm sorry for dumping that all on you.
No, please don't be sorry. I mean, I doubt if we agree on much.
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
I appreciate that you clearly care about what you believe in, and I think that's something. No, but I mean, you have to look at reality, I think, at the same time too, and ask yourself, Well, first of all, how many Americans are trying to flee the United States to go to Russia, and how many Russians are trying to flee Russia to come to the United States?
Sure.
Start there.
So, okay, perfect. That's a great question. So actually, if we look at the numbers for people leaving Eastern Europe, so they were leaving Eastern Europe as early as, I believe it was the 1840s for Western Europe and then later the United States. So the numbers under socialism actually go down a little bit. The numbers today are actually going back up again. So if you look at the populations of Eastern European countries, they've universally pretty much gone down over the last 30 years. And it pretty much, it's funny, if you look at when they stopped the socialist regimes, their birth rates go down tremendously. The people leaving the country go up tremendously, especially within 10 years. Within the first 5 years, we don't really see a massive spike, but then after about 5 years, we start to see a large number of people leaving. But actually, if you look at the number of people leaving, it's in most cases on par with the amount of people leaving before, and it's in some cases even less than the people leaving before, and it's actually it's comparable to the amount of people leaving today. So this is not unique to socialism. This is unique to underdeveloped countries in Eastern Europe.
Right, okay, but first of all, I appreciate the answer, but I'm not sure I really got an answer. Do you think that there's an equal number of Americans trying to leave America and go to Russia than there are Russians who would rather live in America?
Absolutely not, because America's a more developed country, of course.
All right, but America didn't start off this is going to be my point later,
Sure.
but you act like America, like a magic wand was waved and America was a thriving nation. And we all started off third world. The pioneers who came to this country started off in a third world nation, and they built America through a capitalist system into the thriving nation that it is today.
Sure.
It wasn't just magically a thriving capitalist nation. And so the idea that I think you can say that, well, this didn't work in third world nations, but let's go to a nation that started off with nothing and built itself into one of the most powerful nations in the world, and apply a system. Why? I mean, why are you trying to fix something that wasn't broken?
You know what I think is absolutely interesting? Karl Marx actually agrees with you. He thinks that capitalism is necessary for the development of socialism. He thinks that capitalism is a developmental stage of history that is required for socialism. It's actually why he supported.
I don't agree with that.
But I'm just saying he would agree that that you need capitalism to develop a country. It's why he supported colonialism in India. If you look at Marx and Engels, they supported colonialism in India because they thought it would push forward the stage of history of India much faster from being a feudal society to being a capitalist society. It would basically advance productive forces much quicker. So actually, he would say that yes, you do need capitalism to have socialism.
But my last point was going to be.
Absolutely.
You made the point about your friend. When people are fleeing socialist countries, communist countries, they're coming here. They're not running to Russia. They're not running to other nations that are embracing more socialism or more communism. They're coming to America. They're seeking freedom. They want what we have. So why are we trying to break what we have and implement what they have?
So why do I prefer socialism? Is that the question?
Why do you prefer socialism here?
Why do I prefer socialism here? Because I think it's better for my political interest. So my political interest is, again, I believe in the socialization of production, because I believe that most of the capital class, as with all social classes, I think most of them are parasites and leeches, essentially, and I view them as detrimental to in-group health, which in this case would be American people. So I believe that you have to remove these people and socialize production, essentially.
So what are they parasiting off of, these people?
Perfect.
Because the definition of a parasite is getting something from someone
absolutely.
At the detriment of the
That's
host,
a wonderful,
without providing anything else.
That's a wonderful question. So yes, there's a couple of different things here that they're doing. So when we look at property relations, so Rousseau talks about this. If you ever read Jean-Jacques Rousseau. But yeah, basically the big thing with parasitic relations with regards to property is twofold, right? So obviously you get, there's differential relations to value and to production, right? So you get, like, this is the classic socialist argument. I don't know if I need to restate it. I think everyone here has heard it. It's the idea that if you produce something, you produce a certain amount of value. And we've heard this argument. It's a very tired argument. But I don't think I need to restate. All right. So the second issue, the one I'm more concerned with, is the way that the state functions in class society. So what state is a natural outcropping of you have a social group, right? So humans are social primates. We create social groups. It's a natural thing we do. And then then when we have complex enough social arrangements, we get state, essentially. We get a state. So when we have property with a state, it basically takes a certain group of people, usually hereditary. So if we look at, like, for example, feudalism, it was a hereditary system. Capitalism technically isn't, but it functions essentially as such with how wealth is passed down. And then essentially get this hereditary caste of people that can use their wealth and use their political power and leverage it in their own personal interest, which is often detrimental to the national interest, which is far more what I'm concerned with.
Like George Soros.
Sure, yeah. I'd say that a guy like George Soros would be a perfect example of this, yeah.
We do agree on
Yeah.
that.
I actually agree with you on a lot of stuff.
Where would you want to start a business?
Hand on the mic. Hand on the mic.
Yeah.
Where would you want to start a business, a farm? Where would you want to be an entrepreneur? Where would you start Apple or Tesla? USA or Soviet Russia?
So yeah, I wouldn't start a company because I'm not particularly interested in doing that. So yeah, if you wanna be a leech, then yeah, probably the U.S. Yeah.
Companies provide insurance for families. They provide income. They provide economic stability. They provide tax revenue that can actually go back and pay for things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare. It actually does things to help people. What are your thoughts on that? More revenue, more tax revenue as well.
So if we're talking about the circulation of money, capitalism is actually very terrible for money circulation because there's a lot more wealth accumulation, especially in modern capitalism. So if you want to do, like, the only form of capitalism that would be, I wouldn't even say there's actually a great form of wealth circulation for capitalism. So if we're talking about, like, wealth circulation, no, capitalism is not a very great system for that. Number two, with regards to the benefits of companies, I mean, I guess you should ask modern Russia, who's seen their economy, like, essentially implode since 1991. They've seen people's life savings got erased in the course of that. I mean, you've met people who've come from communist countries. I've met people who've come from Russia post fall of the Soviet Union, and I hear some pretty horrific stuff too. So, and it's an anecdotal story, so it doesn't really hold much weight. But yeah, a lot of bad stuff happened. If you look at the raw economic numbers, when you introduce these things, actually the standard of living in Russia decreased significantly. Same with Poland. Same with most Eastern Bloc countries.
What do you want to do for a career? What do you want to do?
So I want to be, this is, what a shocker. I want to be a professor. Ooh, what a shocker. What a shocker. I know, but, we can be a little tongue-in-cheek about it, but no.
The reason why I asked the question is because I just want to be really honest and direct with you and say I think that for a lot of, and I don't necessarily mean you personally, but I think for a lot of people who are pushing communism and socialism as ideals, there does seem to be a resentment towards people who are successful and wealthy, whether they built wealth or inherited wealth. And that does, to me, seem to sort of be a recurring theme.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Please.
Also, I see a recurring theme of, socialists and communists, and what they want to do in life is not necessarily something tangible. They don't want to produce anything in the society, but they would rather kind of sit in the social services and teach philosophy and kind of spread the mindset. Share the mindset rather than actually putting something tangible into the society.
Yeah.
But then you say that the socialist society will just have everybody equal, but that means that you won't be able to climb the economic ladder as you would in the capitalist country.
So I actually am doing stuff that's more tangible. I can't really talk about it too much, but no, there is stuff I'm doing that is very tangible in terms of like political stuff. So no, there is stuff that I am doing as far as that goes. What's up? Russia's not communist. It hasn't been communist since like the 90s, so that would be a pretty bad idea for me considering how the Putin regime treats most of them.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
You seem very knowledgeable. Have you faced any pushback from the non-socialist Marxists?
Non-socialist, so other non-socialists.
The non-socialist Marxists.
Marxist. I'm a non-Marxist. I disagree with dialectical
So what about a socialist that doesn't believe in Marxism?
What's up?
What about a socialist that doesn't believe in Marxism? Do you see any friction in that, or is it kind of like...
I'm a socialist who doesn't believe in Marxism. Yeah, I disagree with a lot of Marxists on a lot of stuff. Primarily, their application of dialectical materialism, I think, is a reductive historical theory that reduces everything to just socioeconomic relations. I think human history and human society is a lot more complex than a series of socioeconomic relations. Although I do think it's important. I do think it's absolutely important, which is why I'm a socialist. But I don't think you can reduce all of history to this basically progression of productive forces. And while I can acknowledge that's important, I think to reduce all of history to that, I think it's a little farcical.
Would you like to see America overthrown as well?
Would I like to see America that's a loaded question. But I'd like to see
I don't mean it to be.
Okay. I'd like to see a change in government, sure. Yeah, that would be, obviously.
A change to what?
A change to what? Like a change to Sorelian syndicalism.
What's that?
It's so Sorelian syndicalism.
You know what he's talking about.
Yeah, no. Sorelian syndicalism is an ideology of George Sorel, who was a French thinker from the late 19th, early 20th century. He basically posited that the way that political economy should work is you should have basically syndicates, which are basically workers' unions, labor unions. Essentially, they should own their local production, and then they should form themselves into cooperative bodies that are like based on common occupation. So
another person, you said, what was his name?
George Sorel.
And you said that he was a thinker?
He was a thinker and an
activist.
So
why is it that he's a thinker and he's imposing his thinking ideas on the working class who are actually contributing to the society?
Because a lot of them supported it at the time, actually. So there's a massive socialist movement in France at this time, a very large socialist movement. But what his main concern was that he felt like they were making too many concessions. He was against a lot of the reformism, because there were two brands of socialism at the time. There was reformist socialism, which is where we get social democracy now. And then there was more the revolutionary brand of socialism. He was in the more the revolutionary brand of socialism, and he was basically just trying to say, hey, we've been trying reformism for like 30, 40 years now. We've really gotten very little, and whenever they give us something new, they take back a lot of the stuff they gave us before. This obviously isn't working. We need to do a more revolutionary approach.
So is there anywhere where that ideology works?
Where it was implemented?
Yes, and it's
so Sorelian syndicalism never was implemented because it was more of the elements of it were implemented in the Soviet Union, elements of it were implemented in Italy, elements of it were implemented across Europe, but in its entirety, Sorelian syndicalism was never fully implemented. I know in Italy the plan was eventually to do a full transition to Sorelian style syndicalism, but then never got to that because of the war.
I think we have another question.
Yes, sir. Clearly done some research.
You guys, first, it's really an honor to be here. I haven't been in a classroom in 30 years. This is fun. So I really appreciate, number one, I appreciate people from both sides sharing openly and without, emotion in this and that. It's really refreshing for me to see. So I'm really, this is
props
great
to these two, for sure.
Yeah, so
Props to y'all.
honestly, thanks for showing up. It's awesome. So a couple things. So again, I'm 1,000 years old. I'm 66 years old. I haven't been in a classroom. I haven't been in academics in a very long time. But a long time ago, I got an MBA, and then I did a PhD in transpersonal psychology. So I might see things a little bit differently than you guys do. First, because of my age, experience in life. I'm from downtown Chicago, so I was raised with a lot of people from Eastern Europe. You have this conversation with them, they're going to not agree with a single thing for 1 second. Waiting in bread lines when they were very young. But I don't want to go there. What I really want to do is talk about this a little bit more. Theoretically, all the arguments you guys are giving, they're beautiful arguments. They're beautiful political systems in theory. Sounds great. It's wonderful you're studying them. It's great that you're learning this stuff. However, what we're ignoring is human psychology. We're ignoring how humans behave.
Totally. Humans are
at the macro level.
evil.
So you guys are talking micro level. To me, I'm listening, but I'm like, okay, blah, 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 blah. Let's just keep going. But at a macro level, to solve a problem, the issue really is this. Number one, who are you going to pick as your poison? You're going to pick either big government or you're going to pick corporations. So, unfortunately, humans run both of these sanctions. You have people running corporations, you have people running the government. So which one do you think is not going to lie to you? Which is going to lie to you less? Because really, we're being lied to left and right if you guys haven't figured this one out.
Yeah.
So, this is a long time ago, when I was doing my MBA, and I don't mean to take your time, but I think this is relevant to what's going on here, because somebody should finally help this conversation move along. I'm sorry if it's me. But we studied the Japanese corporations a long time ago. I did an MBA in the 80s. So you guys were, your parents were not even born yet, probably. But the long and short is that when we looked at what a good corporation is supposed to look like. You're seeing a lot of bad corporations. You're seeing a lot of people who are, a good corporation is supposed to take care of a 40-year time horizon at the least. This is what we were taught. Really supposed to look at the employees and treat them like family and really look at their long-term. So you guys are seeing terrible corporations that are ripping their employees off, ripping the people off, and I agree with you. A lot of the corporations are terrible, and the leadership is terrible. You're looking at governments that are doing the same thing. In my opinion, you got to pick your poison. You're going to trust government, or you're going to trust corporations, because that's the two systems you're looking at.
Good point.
Yeah.
Because to what extent, though, I mean, when you have governments and corporations, you don't necessarily have to trust either one because the one is set up to regulate the other. And in a socialist or communist paradigm, you only have one pole of power, which is the government, the party, and everything that stands against it is counter-revolutionary and usually gets drug off to the torture chambers pretty quick. Usually the professors first, so you might want to think about that one.
Yeah.
But I would say, though, that when given the choice between the two, and I certainly agree that both have the potential to be too big and detrimental to and people's lives in many ways. But a corporation doesn't have the right to take your freedom away, and a corporation doesn't have the right to take your life away, and the corporation doesn't have the right to take things from you. The government can do all of these things and has done these things, and oftentimes in communist societies and socialist societies, these are the things that get corrupted, and this is where people end up jailed for opposing the regime or having their lives taken from them, and any countless atrocities that happen that don't typically happen in nations where corporations are thriving.
Yeah, and I also think that as far as dealing with the corporations, I think that's why it's great that we have a free market, so it's not a monopoly on the resources and stuff. So you have independent farmers, independent pharmacists, independent doctors, and to kind of combat. If you don't want to go to Johnson & Johnson, you can go to your local clinic or something like that. So that's the beauty of the free market.
But corporations are problematic too. Sorry, I mean, this is a stupid example, perhaps, but in our everyday lives, I think the social media, almost all the social media giants are left-leaning, and so they dominate the public square when it comes to the way we interact and the way we use the internet. And if they don't like what you believe, they'll make sure that no one can see you and no one can hear you, or they'll prevent you from having an account in general. I would still rather have individuals running social media companies than the government running social media companies if I have to choose. And I am saying this as somebody who feels like I am targeted by social media corporations.
Based on historical facts, I see nothing to admire in the Soviet Union, even when it started, because the mass collectivization into collective farms that was done in the 20s and 30s caused tens of millions of people to starve to death. There is the big debate of historical figures of mass murders is who killed more people. Was it Mao Zedong, Stalin, or Hitler? And a lot of historians put Mao Zedong at the top, which again was mass collectivization that caused mass starvation in China. China had a much greater population, but then number two is Stalin. And so, and Karl Marx, talk about a parasite. The guy didn't want to work a day in his life, so he created this system so he wouldn't have to work, and he didn't even want to bathe and keep his family, didn't want to do a damn thing for his family to feed his family. So talk about a parasite. Karl Marx was one of the greatest parasites in history.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Quick question. So what are your thoughts on the TikTok ban or proposal on the TikTok ban, and would the WalkAway movement benefit or be hurt by the TikTok ban?
I'm not in favor of banning any social media platforms. I'm not in favor of it. And I think that we would be harmed by any banning. I'm not for it. I think that grown people can make their own decisions, and I think that people should, need to be monitoring what their children are using, what they're using. And I think if we have to regulate, do you have thoughts on the matter?
No, I was agreeing with you that I think families within family, but I think TikTok's horrible. I mean, it's the worst of all of them. I've been banned off there for slurs that I've never said a slur.
Yeah.
I can put up the same video on every other platform, but I think it should be, I'm wary of the government banning anything. I think it should be within families. but we're not doing that. So.
And I mean, look, it's not like I'm a big regulation person either, but I think if there are regulations that have to be implemented, if it's a matter of like literally like data mining and things like that that are in the interest of national security, I can perhaps appreciate that, but I think an outright ban is overreach.
I was wondering, so I've found it very interesting how, like all of you on the panel, none of you were what you described as like closet conservatives. You were all actually liberal or leftist or sort of like adherents or followers of the Democrat Party. But then something happened that you sort of woke up. And because I'm assuming we heard your stories, which I found extremely interesting, but I assume you've met many other people who also kind of woke up. I was just wondering if each of you could kind of share from what you've actually observed firsthand, what causes people to kind of like come out of it? Sometimes seems almost like brainwashing or like, you know, I mean, obviously it isn't, but it seems that it has that element of it. What have you actually observed causing people to come to their senses and realize something's going on here?
When it affects them personally.
Yeah, suffering.
Theory is one thing. You can study all you want. You can be very knowledgeable. When it reaches your doorstep, you have a different take on it. And for I think for everyone on this panel, it reached our doorstep and it woke us up.
Yep.
And it happened for a lot of people in 2020. Just anecdotally, online and in person, even in LA, I've met a lot of people who, you know, maybe they didn't become Christian conservative, but something shifted in the last 4 years. I think we all feel it. So that is absolutely undeniable. And it's more people than some people might think. Absolutely.
And I would take it just a little step further and say that I think specifically the thing that arrives on people's doorstep, sometimes it comes in a different package in a different way, or it's a different experience that causes it, but it's always betrayal. The common theme I hear in every WalkAway story is this moment of the realization that you were betrayed. Because you believed something, or you were a part of something, or you felt like you were in something for the greater good, and you realized that you were actually being completely lied to and manipulated. And what that looks like for everybody is a little bit different, but almost every WalkAway story begins with this, like, oh my God, you lied to me. I was betrayed. You know? This was a long evening. Look, first of all, thank you so much to those of you who probably are ideologically opposed. Thanks for coming and sharing your thoughts and asking your questions. We actually really respect and admire you for doing that and appreciate it. And thank you all so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you.